Yeah, I know. Another Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere video essay. Unless you weren't expecting it to be about that from an ambiguous title I put on this video later. Honestly, the first Ace Combat game I've played after someone told me I would probably enjoy it. I don't know jack about planes or Ace Combat, so I put it off for over a year. But now that I crash played through all the game paths and almost all 52 missions, I gotta say, Newcom designers are crack addicts. One of the more surreal entries in the Ace Combat series, released nearing the end of the original PlayStation's lifespan in 1999. It was technically released worldwide, but you're gonna see why we're talking about the Japanese version, not limited to the fact that the Japanese version has a whole second disc, and the largest amount of missions in any Ace Combat game, while the international version has a linear 36 missions. Disgraceful. I mean, it's not terrible. The Japanese version had more than a few filler, cliché, and repetitive missions with minor changes, but after that version it just feels so dumbed down by comparison. Now listen, I may have one or two minor skill issues when it comes to Ace Combat.
Target. Oh my god, no!
You idiot.
I guess that's what I get for starting with the second hardest game in the entire damn series. But I powered through this thing in like 5 days because I was so hooked on the story, which the international version quite notably lacks, and where 85% of the game budget probably went. In fact, it probably caused Namco's production costs to go up because they had to manufacture two 700MB discs to fit the damn thing. Perhaps the international version was different because of a similar situation to Driver 2, where the game was extremely ambitious and frankly too much for the PlayStation 1, and suffering sales-wise because the PlayStation 2 was just around the corner, and it wouldn't really make sense to go through the effort to do a full translation for the international release, especially considering how much of the budget had probably already been blown. Anyhow, thank God for the fan-made English patch. But even with it, I got confused and shocked at a few points. Oh yeah, spoiler warning. I don't usually do these, but I would seriously love to play this game without at least some major spoilers, and chronologically this is the newest game in the timeline, so you wouldn't want to be spoiled for the remake, would you? Any day now. I can feel it. Obviously, one of the main reasons this game has gotten more attention recently is its pristine gameplay refined from the great base laid by Ace Combat 2 and sense of— No it isn't! It's the f***ing anime! Created by Production IG, now maybe that doesn't sound familiar to some of you, so let me just say End of Evangelion, Attack on Titan, Vinland Saga, FLCL, some other stuff, and Ghost in the Shell. So, I think it's fair to say they knew what they were doing with these cutscenes. Unfortunately, even with 2 discs they are still compressed to hell because it's the PlayStation 1. In fact, they are so compressed that they almost can't be upscaled. I like to think that the HD footage is sat on a hard drive in some vault, but knowing 90s Japanese game preservation, it's not that likely. Which is a real shame because these cutscenes are really good looking, if you can get used to them being about 6 pixels. There's a lot of them too, like at least a third of the whole game time, so it would be a pretty big shame for them to be lost to time. Similarly to other stuff the animation studios worked on, the game has themes of technology, corporate war, and a dystopian future. It is surprisingly mature for a game in which 100% of the gameplay consists of flying fighter jets and shooting. It plays into the technological theme really well with different UIs and operating system boot-ups depending on what faction you partake in, biased news channels, and elements of political satire. Different factions also determine different viewpoints of unfolding events and serve as interesting perspective, however also change the outcome of your story since the game is divided into 5 different paths. The slick technological presentation really has aged well, and the graphics during the gameplay aren't too bad either. Obviously they get a bit tacky once you get up close, but during a dogfight your eyes will be darting all over the place, and you won't really notice them all that much. And I'm not just saying that because you either have a lot of UI elements or your plane's arse in the way. I'd say they're even slightly improved from Ace Combat 2, and then basically every game in the series going forward used this UI style. It's a good thing it's there too, because while the plane models are pretty good, except Neocom, while most of the rest of the planes are based on real life, Neocom designers made these designs from the shapes of the lines of code they were snorting. In seriousness though, the models are fine, but the low-res environments can mess with your depth perception a bit, which is less than ideal for someone like me. Though this isn't to say the game doesn't contain neat details, especially on things like the looping menu, mission objective CGI, or calls with other characters. There's even faint alarm and warning sounds under the slightly sinister droning menu. Speaking of Ace Combat staples, good music! The soundtrack is brilliantly composed and has that specific late 90s sound of the future that can get pretty experimental at times too, with odd time signatures, distant echoes, strange noises, and just that little something being off. Don't worry, we'll get to it. It's a great mash of electronic and occasional traditional instrumentation. If I had to describe it in a single sentence, I'd say it's like 90s club music on Benadryl. In fact, that could be applicable to the entire game, because this thing can really switch gears from a funny jet fighting game to existential horror really quick. No little part of which is the soundtrack and what could almost be described as elements of proto-analog horror, with all sorts of harsh, strange and trippy visual effects. By the time you get to some of the last missions, it feels a lot more like a fight for survival or revenge, and not just shooting for the heck of it. And this wouldn't be stretching the truth too far, since this game has several moments of testing your morals, which can ultimately lead to different paths and endings, each of which can function as its own story, but also tie together if you play all of them. Oh, and if you do play all of the paths, here is the order I would recommend playing in. Speaking of which, story paths, the big selling point of this game. Now I'm dead serious when I say you can enjoy this game even if you have little interest in fighter jets or war. And I know how you lot are, 90% of you won't play the game and just watch the story recap instead. So come on, get out of here, unless you are prepared to have basically everything spoiled by my mediocre script writing. Even a surface level recap may double the length of this script. Oh well, you have been warned. The game starts in the 2040s with you working as a pilot for the Universal Peace Enforcement Organization, or UPO for short, and a part of the Special Armed Response Unit, or SARF. You get various news snippets of tensions arising between two huge corporations which have basically replaced government rule in their areas, General Resources and Neocom. General Resources having been around for a good while Neocom being the ambitious newer company. Obviously, conflict between the two would be a pretty disastrous, so UPO has been established to keep situations from escalating into a war. You get to meet a couple characters. Eric and Fiona are your fellow fighter pilots, and a character named Renna being the star of UPO, unquote. Although due to a disease which prevents her from being exposed to sunlight, she is a little mysterious. You might ask how she can fly a jet then. Well, this game utilizes planes having a so-called coffin system, instead of typical jet cabins, which allow you to establish a neural link with your plane or something. Then your peers at the moment are Commander Park, who usually gives you your orders, and Gabriel Klaxon, the representative for UPO in politics and a big advocate for peace. You get a couple missions to get a hold of the game with cool beats mentioned before, even flying alongside Renna. It is then when you come across a man named Dijon, I'm not sure how his name is pronounced, and the two of you hit it off with a training mission where he seems impressed by your skills before being sent out on a real one to stop Neocom forces. Renna seems quite fond of him already, and he is hyped up as being the best pilot at General Resources. After dealing with the invading Neocom fleet, however, he does make an interesting proposition to the player. Come with me to GR. This sparks a decision sequence, the first of many. But being the goody two-shoes you are, you follow your pals at UPO. After a small while, Renna, clearly smugged by the meeting with Dijon, offers you to go up with her to search for something, non-authorized however. Park rings and says there's an emergency, but we don't have time for filler missions with not much relevance to the plot, so you go with Renna. The two of you eventually follow an unauthorized fleeing General Resources aircraft through the tight canyon, though at the moment it does not seem hostile. That and the fact that at this point in the game UPO does seem kind of biased to General Resources. All the while Renna is having some kind of breakdown, which may or may not be a sign of what's to come. Eventually you find a secret neocon base and take care of it, which swiftly takes you to the next mission, and this is a pretty big turning point in the game. This mission has you guard a private jet containing Klaxon and Fiona, though for some reason this top secret mission is intercepted by General Resources. That's strange, but you take them down rather quickly, but as soon as you do, Renna appears out of nowhere and informs you that Park has issued orders to shoot the private jet down because they are committing espionage by moving to Neocom.
I have no idea why, but probably because of their drugs in the workplace policy.
Either way, you are faced with the choice to shoot down either one.
Decide.
You obey your orders and shoot down the private jet. What truly happened is kept secret from the world. Park takes over and you continue working at UPO, however it's this point right here where the UPO pilots really start questioning if what they're doing is right. Despite this, the group continues on. During one mission in particular, Bug Hunt, Renna is almost infected with a virus that would convert her to a machine, however the player saves her, further improving the relationship and sort of making her come around her humanity more. Rather than the cold figure we saw earlier in the game who wouldn't hesitate to shoot down people close to her. However, UPO is giving out increasingly sketchy missions, culminating in a mission of you attacking in Neocom planes. And as soon as you get back, Park informs you that SARF is disbanded as the realization dawns of you that you have been used to wage war between Neocom and General Resource, as part of a revolution started by terrorist cell Ouroboros, led by Dijon, who have even offered Renna to join with the prospect of an extremely powerful aircraft named the Night Raven, designed by General Resources with her as the main subject. It's essentially everyone for themselves now, with just you and Eric left. Furious at Park and Ouroboros, the two of you decide to take them out. Renna has a change of ways and attempts to help you out before being downed herself. This is a pretty satisfying final mission, and once you finish it, you find out that Renna survived the crash, and the three of you are left to wonder what next after stopping the revolution. It's a bit of a cliffhanger, but definitely one of the more positive endings. But what if you disobeyed Park's orders and prevented the demise of Klaxon and Fiona? Well, you can defect to Neocom. Fiona is now more prominently featured, but more importantly, you meet her sister Cynthia, who conveniently happens to be working for Neocom. And the first mission you spend together is a real paradox, because you get a beautiful woman and a fugly pencil plane that handles like shit! She seems to take an interest in you and talks about Neocom's new technologies, namely sublimation, which to put it in simple terms is copying consciousness into the electrosphere, which is some kind of computer dimension, mostly handled by side character and computer guru Simon. He's a minor character and is about the average 4chan user, but he does give you an optional mission to outer space, which is the one and only time this has ever happened in the series so far. Cynthia is interested in the sublimation and applies herself, much to the dismay of her sister. Eventually, Cynthia tells you that she has received an interesting offer. I think you can see where this is going. At the end of the next mission, she asks if you would like to defect with her to Ouroboros. Nah. So you go with Fiona instead and continue working with Neocom. The revolution breaks out once again, and Renna one-shot no-scopes an entire f***ing island with a laser in the Night Raven. This culminates in you having to shoot down the airship base Cynthia is presumably on. However, Renna and Dijon escape from the craft, heading into the Geofront, a giant underground complex and city, notably a very similar feature in Evangelion, which starts a fan-favorite mission, Tunnel Vision. The hallways are tight, the music starts off tense, and you have to be on your feet to not crash. I have no idea what possible practical use these tunnels could serve, but we have the technology, I suppose. You follow them through the tunnels and fight in the geofront. This is one of the hardest boss fights in the game, but if you get the right pattern, it is doable. And with some hacking help from Simon, you shoot them both down. After the fight, the revolution is foiled and Fiona grieves the loss of her sister, only to receive a call and find out that she is alive in the electrosphere. Fiona rejects this, as to her, it just isn't her, leaving us with a rather somber ending. What if you chose to go with Cynthia to Ouroboros? Well, for one, you get to keep one of the best characters in the game. You and Cynthia join the revolution, and at first things seem to be going well. Renner destroys Neocom's headquarters once again, and you get to cause a bit of corpo destruction yourself. However, Cynthia, in conversation with Dijon, questions the brutality of his methods, and soon realizes that the facade of using sublimation to bypass the limits of the human body to a higher form of life was a lie, and that Dijon is basically just looking for revenge and full of crap. So she rejects him rather spectacularly.
What a twist.
You and Cynthia once again fight the revolution and shoot down Renner, and that's about it, except for this shot of Simon being weird as usual. Now, let's roll the tape even further back to Dijon offering you general resources. You go with him, he's cool after all. Welcome to General Resources, the world's most powerful company. You get introduced to Keith, potentially the best subordinate in the game. Although General Resources are a bit militaristic, so naturally he has his doubts about the player, and starts off pretty tough on you. You do get the best plane designs in the game though, which is more than can be said for Neocom's wet dream, so it's not so bad. Through your progress on several missions, he does warm to you slightly, although he is annoyed by you never being there to answer calls. Not as annoyed as he's about Dijon getting all mysterious and talking to him less. This is what's called foreshadowing. During one mission in particular, Stratosphere, you are faced with the choice to complete your objective that only your plane can do or save Keith. Well, you know we want our boy around, so I saved him. He warms to you a lot after this, however Dijon does have some strong words of disappointment for him, and surprisingly little backlash for us, which of course leads to dilemma. By now you can guess what choice we are proposed. Dijon asks you to join his faction, much to the shock of Keith. But we're loyal to our mega company, so we stick with him. Afterwards, Keith is furious at Dijon, much like Eric was to Ouroboros, and vows he would take him down himself. One of the next missions is a huge battle, although eased by the fact that you and Keith have a points race to see who can commit the most aerial murder. This is why he's the best subordinate in the game. He actually does something and helps you out instead of just being there. By now, the same stuff happens as before. Take down airship, Renner blows up island, you follow her to the geofront. However, this time you are sadistically ordered to collapse it to trap the Night Raven inside, which seems less than ethical. But it doesn't work anyway, so we get some more of Renner's memories, though this time it sounds like they're repressed or something. And you have a fight, which results in both Keith and Dizion shooting each other down. You are now pretty much alone, that is, until one last mission.
ちょっと待ってください。カメラさん、ズームして。あそこ、ほら。ズームできないの？ほら。たった今、正体不明の銀色の、しかもたくさん。くそ、なんだ。おい、こっち来るぞ。逃げろ。ほら、来てるだろ。右だ。何か撃った。
Imagine my face after 3 boss fights with this damn thing and a heap of wrecked planes along the way. You are sent out to fight 8 Night Ravens by yourself. The odds are against you and it's not looking good. They have superior agility and weapons when suddenly...
Blow your mind. We're changing.
Hacking complete.
You get the only instance of flying an X-49 Night Raven in the whole game. And on top of that, probably the only instance of technically flying 2 planes at once. This is a greatly climactic mission that is both a shocker and a treat to the player. But after you're done cleaning up, it does end kind of abruptly. If you join Dijon's route to Ouroboros, everything starts to fall in place. You meet with Renna once again as accomplices for the first time in a good while, and Dijon gives us a prep speech of sorts. It starts off with a fun vibe, but questionable ethics. You destroy freeways, bases, weapons, and are even tasked with shooting down fleeing company executives' helicopters. It's all for a good cause though, right? As you protect the airship and take out the corporations one by one, amongst congratulations from your faction, the screen suddenly goes static. We cut to a lab. An unfamiliar character named Yoko and what looks to be a younger Dijon.
成功よ。
だったら早いとこ頭についてるこの邪魔なやつを取ってくれ。
はいはい。
She informs him that his sublimation is complete. Presumably, this is a general resources project. One they may not want around anymore.
ほら見てこのカメラ。こっちを見てる。
誰だヨコ、もう終わったんだろう。
ちょっと真面目に。後にしなさい。
ヨコ。
As his copy turns on, they kiss, while an unheard Electrosphere Dijon claims that isn't him.
なんだこいつらは。爆破する気か。
ターゲットは確認したか。2人しかいません。よし、負け添えはあの男だけで十分。あと30秒。撤収。
テロか。ヨコ、逃げろ。ヨコ。ダメだ。聞こえない。ヨコ。早く気づいてくれ。ヨコ。
The real Dijon died a long time ago.
なぜ俺はまだ死んでいないんだ。ヨコ、お前は俺に何をしたんだ。
We cut back to our mission, but as soon as we finish it, as quickly as the static was gone, it comes back. We get another look at Renna's memories, but this time something is off. She knows we're watching, recalling her repressed memories and slowly realizing Dijon had slowly been preparing her for his war. But more than that, realizing we have control. But before we have a chance to settle things, a familiar face appears. It's Keith, and he's back with a vengeance. Everyone proceeds to battle, the outcome of which is Renna shooting down Keith, and him proceeding to get lodged in her wing, therefore telling the player to shoot him down and take out Renna with him. You do it and take out the airship. By now, you're on your own, with no one but Dijon. Is now a good time to remind you this is the same universe as Ridge Racer. The next mission has no start briefing, and it seems like it's going to be the final dogfight in the skies with Dijon. Until...
ならばなぜこんな消し方をする。お前誰なんだ。そう、ここにはいられない。何が目的で誰がこんなものを俺に。
Entering electrosphere.
The game's climax is a battle in the Electrosphere. And despite the trippy graphics, there is nothing here except you and Dijon. The music is sinister and ominous, the screen is blurry and strange. The only other sound to accompany is your jet. As you deliver the eventual final blow. When you first start the game, you can name your character. The default name is Nemo, or in Latin, nobody. After the final cutscene and past the credits, after completing all the paths, this happens.
やっとまた会えたな。どうだ？もう気がついているのかもしれないが、お前は私によって作られたプログラムだったのだ。そしてこれまでお前が見てきた全ての出来事、この私がお前を AI としてプログラムした全ての可能性、それが私に答えを教えてくれた。ここまでたどり着いたお前は多くのパターンによって変化し続ける全ての世界であの男を完璧に抹殺することができたはずだ。私から陽子を奪ったあの男、デッドコピーとして自分だけは抜け抜けと生き残ったあの男、ビジョン。
Simon, that seemingly minor character from earlier, informs you that you are an AI he has made for the sole purpose of destroying what remains of Dijon for taking Yoko away from him. The ultimate simp. And says he shall let you into the real world to perform one of these paths, since they all end with that one thing in common. Now compare that to the goody two-shoes American version where the main enemy is just a rogue AI Italian and for some reason they just renamed Neocom. Was it too hard to pronounce? All in all, Ace Combat 3 may be a warning about technology, ideals, greed, compassion, and morality, and probably tons of other stuff I can't think to mention. But to me it's a warning about not losing your humanity. Rena had a reason, but realized it. Ultimately, it wouldn't make her happy. Dijon never meant what he claimed, he wanted to get back at those who wronged him. Cynthia had utopian dreams but didn't want them overshadowing ethics. Eric and Keith questioned the cause they were fighting for and found a sense of renewed purpose by their own design. Despite how overwhelming the news of a simulation is, it displays everything more humanizing than ever. The characters and factions are no longer just something for you to shoot at, and the choices you make are testing you. This humanizing aspect is something games following up Electrosphere would use too, so it's hardly any wonder then that people have been wanting a remake as far back as the early 2000s. Or maybe it's a warning about being a designer for Neocom.
Make him fly Neocom planes.
Or maybe I'm just digging my own hole here by going in way too deep. But on top of all that emotional baggage and deep lore, it's just a good game. No set path feels too stretched out, and once you get set on one, it will probably not be more than 9 or 10 missions at the maximum. Just to make comparison, Ace Combat 2 sold 500,000 copies in a year. They didn't have to go this hard, but they did, and it's brilliant. You could say that because of the huge improvements the second game made in terms of things like graphics and gameplay, the pressure was off for major improvements to those. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Allowing the team to really put their efforts into fleshing out the substance while using the base of 2, which clearly yields results when creative people are allowed more freedom for the end product. Embedding this game as a huge cult classic that people like me can overanalyze the hell out of, despite the fact that the studio have claimed that remaking 3 would be more difficult than re-releasing Ace Combat 4, 5 and 0 combined. What do you think? Hey all, this is probably one of the longest video productions I've ever done on this channel. Well, apart from some projects that have been stuck in limbo and footage on my hard drive from like 2022 and 2023, but I mean the script itself is probably the longest I've ever written so far and took about 3 days to write, on top of the time it took to go through the game.
To understand it.
What was that?
Part of it is me being a lazy bastard though. I can only dread what the editing is going to be like. Man, uploading this thing to YouTube is going to be a nightmare. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I genuinely would probably never have made this video if my friend Zig hadn't told me about this game. And who knows what's going to go down now. Anyway, this'll be me signing off.